On a warm summer night in northern Kentucky, the parking lot is full. Headlights sweep across gravel, doors slam, boots hit pavement, laughter spills out of open car windows. A neon beer sign flickers in a front window like a heartbeat that can't decide whether it wants to keep going. From inside the building, you can already hear its country music. The steady thump of a bass line, the rhythm of people trying to forget their week. To an outsider, it looks like any other honky-tonk, a working-class bar with a small stage, cheap drinks, and the kind of sticky wooden floors that come from decades of spilled beer and hard nights. But if you ask locals what this place is, they won't call it a bar first. They'll call it by its other name, the gateway to hell, Bobby Mackey's music world. A place that has become one of America's most infamous haunted locations because the stories don't stay polite, they don't stay vague. They aren't the soft kind of ghost tale where you hear a whisper and feel a chill and then go home safe. These stories are brutal, people being scratched, women screaming in the restroom, a smell of rotting meat that comes and goes like something is breathing it into the room. Voices on tape, footsteps in an empty basement, a caretaker who claimed he was attacked, possessed, and nearly destroyed by whatever lived here. A so-called exorcism performed inside a bar. And beneath all of it, beneath the music, beneath the dancing, beneath the laughter, there's always the same detail, the same dark center of gravity, a well in the basement, a pit, a hole that, according to legend, is not just a hole. It is a door. Tonight, you are going to hear the full story, the history, the real crimes that fed the myth, the alleged hauntings, the people who built the legend with their own experiences, and the skeptical explanations that might be just as terrifying as the paranormal ones. Because whether or not you believe in demons, the Bobby Mackey story forces one uncomfortable question. What happens when a place absorbs too much violence and then keeps performing it back to anyone who walks in? This is Bobby Mackey's music world, the gateway to hell. Wilder, Kentucky sits just south of Cincinnati, Ohio. Close enough that you can see how modern life presses against its highways, suburbs, stadium lights in the distance. But if you step a little off the main path, you find pockets of older America, low roads that follow the river, clusters of trees that keep secrets, buildings that have watched the decades pass without ever feeling truly clean again. Bobby Mackey's stands near the licking river that matters. Rivers always matter in stories like this, not because water is magical, but because rivers are old. They pull people to them. They hide sound. They carry away evidence. They serve industries, and those industries leave stains that don't wash out, even when the building changes its name and purpose. Long before it was a music venue, The property has been associated historically and in local rumor with hard, physical work and with death. One commonly repeated point in the Bobby Mackey lore is that the building once operated as a slaughterhouse or meat processing facility. Different sources and retellings vary in the specifics and timelines, and some details have been exaggerated over the decades as the haunting narrative grew. But what's consistent in almost every version is the idea that animals died there, that blood and offal were part of the daily reality, and that the smell of mitra, iron heavy, rotten, became part of the building's identity. Even if you strip the supernatural away, think about what that means. A slaughterhouse isn't just a place where something dies. It's a place where death is routine, normalized, industrial. And for some people, that kind of repeated violence changes how a place feels. You don't have to believe in spirits to accept that some locations can become psychologically oppressive simply because your brain notices what your conscious mind tries to ignore, the faint metallic scent that shouldn't be there, the stains you can't explain. Now, take that baseline, an old building near a river, tied to blood and heavy work, and add what happened in 1896. Because this is the event that many fans of the legend treat like the origin curse of the location. Even though the historical connections between the crime scene and the exact building have been debated and blurred by time. The murder of Pearl Bryan. Pearl Bryan was a young woman from Indiana. In the winter of 1896, she traveled toward Cincinnati. Shortly after, she disappeared. Her body was found in Fort Thomas, Kentucky, in an area not far from where Bobby Mackey's would later operate. The details are not clean. They're not the kind of true crime story you can listen to comfortably. Pearl Bryan's body was discovered mutilated. Most famously, she was found without her head. The case caused panic and obsession in the region. Newspapers devoured it. People whispered about sex, pregnancy, shame, medicine, and violence. Two men, Scott Jackson and Alonzo Walling, were arrested and eventually convicted. The historical record shows they were executed for the crime. And yet, the case has remained a magnet for speculation because the head was never recovered, never found. That detail is gasoline for legend. Because in communities, when a murder is especially shocking and especially unresolved in one key way, it stops being just a case. It becomes a wound, and wounds invite stories to explain the pain. Over the years, the Pearl Bryan murder became entangled with rumors of occult rituals, satanic groups, and secret societies. In some retellings, the killers were tied to dark ceremonial acts. In others, those claims are treated as sensationalism from the erroneous papers inflating fear to sell papers. Here is the truth we can say safely. The Pearl Bryan murder was real, horrific, and it left unanswered questions that allowed rumor to flourish. Whether there was any genuine occult element is a separate questioning, one that has never been proven in any definitive way. But the Bobby Mackey legend takes those rumors and nails them to the building like a curse plaque. According to the haunting narrative, Pearl's spirit is one of the presences connected to the property. Some versions claim her head was removed near this area, or that parts of the crime's aftermath echo into the building's later history. Again, the exact geographic and factual linkage is disputed, and many researchers caution against treating the haunting mythology as a clean extension of the historical crime. But in a haunted place story, disputed doesn't matter as much as believed, because belief is what makes a location powerful. And by the time Bobby Mackey's became Bobby Mackey's, enough people believed the land was dirty, spiritually, emotionally, historically, that the place was ready for a haunting story to thrive. Now, we step into the 20th century when the building becomes more than a rumor. It becomes a nightlife spot, and it begins collecting its own tragedies. Before, it was Bobby Mackey's music world. The site has been associated, in some accounts, with being a club under different names. One of the names that frequently appears in retellings is the Latin Quarter. Depending on the version, this era carries its own legends, fights, jealousy, substance abuse, and at least one death that becomes central to the haunting story. The most famous of these is the story of a woman often referred to as Johanna. In the legend, Johanna was a dancer at the club. She fell in love with a man sometimes described as a singer or a performer. In the most dramatic versions, he was unfaithful, and her heartbreak turned into obsession. The story says she was poisoned or murdered, and that her body was disposed of in the basement well. In some versions, her father was involved, or her father's spirit also haunts the place. Here is the careful truth. This story is part of the folklore surrounding the location. It has been repeated so many times that many visitors assume it is confirmed history. But solid documentation is difficult, and details shift depending on who tells it. That doesn't mean nothing happened. At the club, bars do have real violence, real overdoses, real crimes. It means the Johanna narrative, as popularly told, exists in that murky zone where repeated storytelling can harden into truth, even when the evidence is thin. But folklore doesn't require paperwork to be frightening, because the Johanna story functions like a ghost script. It gives the building a tragic female presence, an emotional anchor, and a reason for hauntings in a very specific part of the building, the women's restroom. If you've heard anything about Bobby Mackey's, you've heard about the restroom. People claim it's the hottest spot in the building paranormally, not socially. Visitors and staff have reported women crying in the stalls when no one else is inside. Others have described being pushed, slapped, or scratched. Some say they've heard a voice whisper in their ear while they stared into the mirror. Some claim the smell in a restroom changes suddenly from bathroom cleaner to something else, something sour like decay. Even skeptics admit there's something about that room that gets into people's heads, partly because it's isolated, partly because bathrooms are already places where you feel vulnerable, and partly because once a rumor attaches to a bathroom, every sound becomes suspicious. Pipes knock, air vents moan. Someone shifts in a stall, and your brain, already primed, shapes it into presence. Now add alcohol, add dim lighting, add a crowded bar, add a story you've heard 100 times before you ever walked into the building. That's how hotspots are born. But the Bobby Mackey legend doesn't stop at whispers in a restroom. It goes down to the basement, to the well, to the thing people call the doorway. The basement at Bobby Mackey's has become the symbolic heart of the haunting. In the lore, this is where the darkest acts happened: slaughterhouse work, occult rituals, bodies disposed of, violent energies concentrated. People describe the basement as oppressive, heavy, like stepping into a room where the air has been used too many times. Investigators have reported equipment malfunction, sudden nausea, panic, headaches. Some claim that simply standing near the well area triggers an overwhelming sense of dread. The well itself is central because it is tangible. It is a physical object you can point to and say, "This is the place." And when human beings have a place, we build meaning. We project onto it. We fear it. We worship it. We dare it. In some accounts, the well was eventually filled in or sealed again. Details vary depending on the era and the source, but the legend persists that it remains a spiritual opening, a portal, a place where something can come through. The phrase "gateway to hell" gets used so often that people forget how extreme that claim is. A gateway is not a haunting. A gateway is infrastructure. It implies traffic. It implies that the thing is not just one ghost lingering out of grief. It implies something else uses the opening, something that doesn't belong here but can enter anyway. It's the difference between a tragic spirit and a predatory system. And that is where the Bobby Mackey story becomes especially dark. Because the most famous witness to the haunting didn't describe it like a ghost story. He described it like a battle. His name was Carl Lawson. Carl Lawson is often referred to as a former caretaker or manager of the property. His experiences, described in interviews and accounts over the years, became one of the biggest engines of the Bobby Mackey legend. According to Lawson, the hauntings weren't just noises and shadows. He reported being physically attacked, scratched, shoved, choked. He described seeing dark figures. He described hearing voices. And most famously, he described experiencing what he believed was demonic oppression and possible possession. In the lore, Lawson claimed that something followed him home, that it got into his life, his relationships, his sleep, that he began behaving in ways he didn't recognize, that he felt compelled to return to the building, as if the place had a hook in him. Whether you interpret this as a supernatural attachment or a psychological crisis amplified by fear and obsession, the consequences described are the same: a man losing control of himself. And that is always the most frightening part of any demonic case. Not the idea of horns and fire. The idea of you not being you anymore. According to accounts connected to the case, a minister named Glenn Coe performed what has been described as an exorcism, sometimes more accurately labeled a deliverance, focused on Lawson. This event is often cited as a real exorcism in a bar, which is one of the reasons Bobby Mackey's remains so famous. The idea that a religious rite normally associated with churches and sacred spaces happened in a nightclub adds a layer of taboo that makes the story feel bigger than life. But here's the important question: if an exorcism happened, did it work? According to some tellings, the activity in the building quieted for a time after the deliverance. In other tellings, it continued. In still others, the haunting adapts, shifts to new people, new rooms, new patterns. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the gateway idea alive. Because if this were just one angry spirit, you'd expect a clear arc: appear, torment, be cleansed, vanish. But Bobby Mackey's behaves, in the legend, more like a contaminated site, a place with layers of activity and multiple presences. Some are human, some are not. Some are attached to the land, others to the people. And that brings us to the modern era of cameras, ghost hunting shows, and internet fame. Because one of the reasons Bobby Mackey's remains the conjuring house of Kentucky for many people is that it didn't stay local. Television came, then YouTube, then podcast, then social media. And every time a crew walked in with equipment, the legend gained another layer of testimony. Some claimed they captured EVP's electronic voice, phenomenal whispers on recordings that no one heard at the time. Others captured images they believed were apparitions. Some experienced sudden scratches. Some reported feeling faint or enraged in the basement. Some were terrified in the restroom. And then they left, went home, and told the story to millions of people. But the presence of media also changes the environment. Because once you have cameras, you have performance. Even when no one is lying, the body changes under observation. People behave differently. They react more strongly. They interpret more dramatically. Editing shapes tone. Sound design amplifies silence. A normal draft becomes a cold spot. A loose pipe becomes a knock. A camera glitch becomes a shadow figure. That doesn't mean every experience is fake. It means the environment becomes a feedback loop of fear and expectation. And Bobby Mackey's is one of the strongest feedback loops in American paranormal culture, because it offers everything a haunting location needs to remain famous. A violent historical crime nearby. Legends of murder and disposal. A named witch or demon narrative. A physical portal object. A caretaker with intense personal testimony. A supposed exorcism. And a building that is still operating, still open, still filled with music and bodies and emotional energy. That last part matters more than people think, because an abandoned haunted asylum is scary on camera, but it's static. A living bar is dynamic. Every weekend, the building fills with noise, alcohol, lust, anger, loneliness, celebration, and sometimes violence. If you believe in spiritual energies, that's fuel. If you believe in psychology, that's also fuel. Either way, it keeps the place hot. Now, let's walk room by room through the most commonly reported activity zones, the way you might structure them for a long documentary-style video. Not as proof, as a map of fear. First, the main floor. This is where the band plays, where people dance, where the night feels normal. Here, the haunting is mostly background. Small things, a sudden cold gust, a feeling of being watched from the edge of the room, a shadow in your peripheral vision. The main floor is important because it shows how hauntings often begin, not as a monster, but as an interruption, a glitch in your sense of safety. And in a place like Bobby Mackey's, 100 people can experience 100 different interruptions, each shaping the legend. Second, the women's restroom in the folklore. This is the Johanna room, the place associated with a tragic female spirit. People claim mirrors act strange. Some claim that if you call her name, you'll get a response. Some claim you'll hear crying. Some report scratches. Others report a sudden, overpowering nausea or dizziness. If you want to tell this part of the story professionally, you do two things at once. You let the horror breathe, and you remind your viewers that bathrooms are acoustically strange spaces. Pipes and ventilation create unpredictable sounds. Mirrors distort perception under low light. And if people enter already frightened, their bodies can generate physical sensations, goosebumps, adrenaline spikes, nausea, without any ghost required. Then you ask the question anyway. If it's just psychology, why do so many people report the same room? Third, the basement. This is where the story shifts from ghost to demon, from haunting to alleged infestation. People describe the air as heavy and damp. They describe an oppressive pressure. They report headaches. They claim their equipment fails. They report hearing footsteps when no one moves. They claim to see figures near the well area. In a basement, fear is always stronger because basements are biologically wrong for us. Humans are not built to relax underground. We read darkness differently down there. We listen harder, we imagine more. And in this basement, there's a well, a physical focal point for dread. Fourth, the well portal area. Here, the legend becomes explicit. This is the gateway. This is where rituals allegedly happened, where bodies were supposedly disposed of, where the dead and the non-human can cross. In many stories, investigators who challenge the well or provoke it calling it out, demanding proof, report stronger reactions. That might be paranormal escalation, or it might be psychological suggestion. When you dare something, your body primes for consequence. Every noise becomes an answer. The horror is not just in the claim of a doorway. The horror is in the idea that you can stand at the edge of something and not know whether you're imagining the void, or whether something in the void is imagining you back. Fifth, the back area: storage rooms, dressing areas, staff-only zones. Many haunting stories grow here because these areas are not public. They are dim, quiet, off-limits that makes them perfect containers for legend. People report hearing their names called from behind doors, hearing movement in an empty storeroom, feeling hands on their shoulders while they're alone, closing up at night. If you've ever been the last person in a building, you already know the feeling. It doesn't require the paranormal, but it also doesn't exclude it. Now, after you map the haunting, you have to address the big question that separates a strong documentary from a campfire story. If this place is so active, why isn't the evidence conclusive? Why isn't there one undeniable video, one unmistakable recording, one event that forces the world to agree? And that question has two answers. One, because the paranormal, if it exists, is not a laboratory phenomenon. It does not perform on command. It does not obey your schedule. It may react unpredictably or not at all. Two, because many haunting claims can be replicated by environment and human psychology. And Bobby Mackey's, as a physical building, has several factors that can feed haunting experiences without invoking the supernatural. Old structures settle and creak. Basements collect mold and dampness, which can contribute to headaches and nausea. Infrasound: low frequency, vibration from machinery, HVAC systems, traffic, or even nearby rail activity can create feelings of dread and can cause people to perceive movement in peripheral vision. Alcohol reduces perception accuracy and increases emotional response. Expectation shapes experience. If you go to the gateway to hell, you will interpret things through that lens. And finally, there's the simplest truth. Some places become haunted because we decide they are. Not necessarily by lying, by repeating the story until it becomes part of the building's identity. Until every visitor walks in with a legend already inside their head. At that point, even a normal draft becomes part of the haunting. But here's the twist that makes Bobby Mackey's endure, even when you apply skepticism, even if it's all explainable. Why does it still feel wrong? Why do experienced investigators still report fear there? Why do some staff refuse to go into the basement alone? Why do people who have never read the story claim they felt something the moment they walked in? There are no perfect answers, and that's why the legend survives. Because the Bobby Mackey story isn't just one claim. It's a pile of claims, layered over decades, reinforced by a location that is physically and historically capable of supporting fear. The result is a place where the question never stops, and the question itself becomes a kind of haunting. Now, let's talk about the most dangerous part of any gateway to hell narrative: provocation. Because every haunted location with a portal myth attracts a certain type of visitor. Not the curious, the challengers. The ones who walk into a dark basement and treat it like a stage. They shout, they curse, they demand proof, they say names, they dare the place to do something. In the best case scenario, nothing happens and they go home feeling brave. In the worst case scenario, something does happen, something psychological, physical, or social. Panic attacks, fights, injuries, trespassing consequences. Or someone convinces themselves they brought something home, and the fear ruins their sleep for months. That's why it's important to say this clearly if you're producing horror content responsibly. Bobby Mackey's is a real place connected to real people. It's also an active venue and an active railroad environment nearby. Trespassing and unsafe exploration can kill you with or without a ghost. And psychological harm is still harm. The reason I'm saying that inside a horror script is because it strengthens the story rather than weakening it. Real horror doesn't need you to pretend physics isn't deadly. Real horror is the fact that this place doesn't require demons to ruin someone's life. It only requires the wrong night, the wrong belief, the wrong person, the wrong staircase, and a basement that's been soaked in story for decades. And speaking of decades, one of the most unsettling aspects of the Bobby Mackey legend is how it refuses to end. Most haunting cases end when the family moves out, when the building is demolished, when time erases the witnesses. This one kept operating, kept welcoming crowds, kept inviting emotion, kept getting filmed, kept being talked about. A haunted house that stays open is like a wound that stays uncovered. It's always exposed, always getting touched, always getting infected by new stories. And in that environment, the line between haunted and haunting blurs. Maybe the building is haunted, or maybe the building haunts people, with its reputation, with its history, with the way humans behave when they believe they are standing near a gateway. Now, let's return to the image that makes this place uniquely disturbing. The bar on a weekend night. Picture it clearly. The band is playing. People are dancing. There's sweat in the air. A couple argues in a booth. A bartender laughs too loudly because laughter is armor. The floor shakes under boots. A neon sign buzzes. Everything is normal. Then someone steps away from the noise, away from the crowd, pushing through a staff door they're not supposed to use. Maybe they're looking for a quiet corner. Maybe they're curious. Maybe they've heard the legend and want to see the basement for themselves. They descend the stairs. The music thins out, replaced by a dull hum of the building. The air cools. The smell changes. Damp concrete. Rust. Something old. They reach the bottom. The basement is darker than it should be. And the moment they step onto the concrete, they feel it's the same thing people describe again and again at this place. Not a sound, not a vision, a feeling as if they stepped into someone else's territory. As if the building, for the first time tonight, noticed them. They take a few steps toward the back, toward where the well area is rumored to be. And then, behind them, on the stairs they just came down, they hear it. A footstep, not the echo of their own. A second step, slow, careful, measured. They turn. The stairwell is empty, but the air feels occupied. They tell themselves it's the building settling. They tell themselves it's just a pipe. They tell themselves they're not scared. Then they hear a sound that isn't structural. A whisper, not a word, at first just breath, like someone speaking too softly to catch. They lean their heads slightly, trying to hear it better, and in that instant, they realize the whisper isn't coming from the stairwell. It's coming from behind them, from deeper in the basement, from the direction of the well. And the whisper isn't random. It's rhythmic, almost like a voice practicing speech, almost like something learning how to talk. They back up one step, then another. The whisper stops. They freeze, and after a pause, just long enough for them to hope, they imagined if the whisper returns, closer. And that's when the fear becomes unbearable. Because the basement doesn't feel empty anymore. It feels patient, like the darkness has been waiting all night for someone to come down here alone. They rush back upstairs, heart slamming, trying not to look into the corners. When they burst onto the main floor, the music hits them like bright sunlight. People laugh. A couple spins on the dance floor. Someone claps to the beat, and the person who just came up from the basement realizes something that makes them feel even worse than the whisper. No one noticed they were gone. No one noticed they were scared. No one can see what just happened to them, because the haunting real or imagined didn't happen to the building. It happened to them, and now they have to carry it. That is the Bobby Mackey effect. Not proof, not evidence, experience. And experience is what keeps the gateway to hell alive. Because as long as people keep walking into that building and coming out feeling like they left a piece of themselves behind in the basement, the legend will never die. So here's the final question. The one that belongs at the end of a long documentary-style video like this. If Bobby Mackey's music world really is a gateway, if there truly is a doorway in that basement, why would it stay in one place? Why would something hellish anchor itself to a bar in Kentucky? Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe there is no gateway at all. Maybe there's only a building with a violent history, a famous true crime case nearby, decades of folklore, and a human appetite for darkness served with country music and cheap beer. Or maybe the gateway idea is exactly backwards. Maybe the door isn't in the basement. Maybe the door is in us. The part of us that wants to believe the world has thin spots. The part of us that loves the idea that some places are charged, cursed, different. The part that walks right past warning signs because a story feels more important than safety. If that's true, then Bobby Mackey's doesn't need to be a portal to anything supernatural. It only needs to be what it already is, a place where human violence, rumor, fear, and attention have been concentrated for so long that the atmosphere itself feels alive. And if you spend enough time in that atmosphere, your mind will do what minds always do in the dark. It will put a face on the void. It will give a voice to the silence. It will turn a well into a mouth. And once you've seen it that way, it's hard to unsee. So if you ever go there, if you ever stand in that parking lot at night and listen to music leaking through the walls, remember this: whether the gateway to hell is real or not, the stories are real to the people who live them. The fear is real. The building is real. And the basement is real. And if you go looking for the doorway, the most terrifying possibility isn't that something will come out of it. It's that something in you will answer back.